Hey guys, welcome to Stringer Bridge Farm. I want to talk a little bit about preventing bloat in your cows. As you can see behind me, the cows are in the backdrop and there is plenty of nice, lush green grass for them to eat. And the way I see it from my experience, there's really two things I do to make sure we never encounter bloat with our animals again. The situation we have is we went from basically a dry lot of only hay feed as our primary feed source. I can tell you the happiest cows you'll ever see in your life is when you rotate them onto fresh pasture, which is what we've done here in the last couple weeks. Come on. Ah. There we go. That is where I want them to go. Look at that. Some excited cows. And those cows will very quickly overeat green grass and end up bloated, and it is a fight for survival, I can tell you from experience. So from what I've known and experienced, the number one cause of bloat has been animals getting a hold of all this lush grass on a very empty stomach and overeating to the point of their stomach bacteria is not breaking it down fast enough or properly enough. They get a bunch of froth inside their rumen. Gas is expanding really fast and it basically paralyzes the animal and can kill them. So that's what you're up against. An empty stomach, the wrong gut bacteria, and the cow's excited and eating way too much of it. So it's pretty simple. When you know what you're up against, you just formulate a plan and you move forward with minimizing the potential impact. And of course, here comes my little buddy. We got Heart Face. He was one of our bottle calves and he has just been basically like a pet. Hi, bud. Hi. Goofy fella. So recognizing kind of what you're up against is the first big step in formulating a plan. So to me, it becomes pretty simple at that point. I want to keep their stomachs full of what they're used to eating and introduce the new food very slowly. So both of those things are pretty easy to accomplish in a setup like what we have, which is, we already do rotational grazing. I have a lot of the electrical fence, that temporary electric fence supplies, that type of stuff. So it's really easy for me to, number one, is before I decide to make a move onto this green grass, I make sure those cows are full. So they've got a bale of hay. If you're feeding any feeds, you feed them. And then you open up small little slivers of green grass to them. So I do it just by moving a fence, over 20, 30 feet, give them a little eighth of an acre, something like that. And the cows can start getting used to it. Day number 2, I might open up a slightly larger area. Day number 3, even more. By day 4 or 5, we're pretty much ready to move on to a primarily grass diet. So those bales of hay I just showed you earlier in this video, those have been disappearing in about a day and a half. And you can see it's been a full 24 hours and they've barely touched that bale. So they've moved to a point where they're primarily on grass. Our pastures aren't real consistent, but you can see the primary forages in here is going to be ryegrass and different varieties of clover. Now there's a little bit of other stuff mixed in. There's a little bit of wild vetch and a little bit of bluegrass, some weeds, you name it, it's probably growing out here. But it's all very green, very lush, and the cows have been on it almost a week now. We haven't had any issues. Even their poo is not even that bad a shape. I'll show you if I can find one. It's not even as loose as you would expect going to almost a complete green lush diet. Sorry. So yeah, you can see a couple of our cow pies even with them on this really green grass, transition them slowly. It looks like we hadn't had really any issues. Like I said, they've been on this about a week now, and they're a little bit looser than a hay pile, but I think they actually look pretty good. This is about the loosest one I've seen out here, and it's still standing up pretty good. So nothing I'm worried about that getting these cows sick or anything, that their stomachs can't handle it. And as you can see, it is a primarily clover ryegrass diet. But those are just a few things to keep in mind when you're you know, basically trying to convert your herd over to these green forage grasses. I can tell you from experience, not intentionally, but like we've had animals bust through a fence or whatever from dry lot situations, and you can have bloat very quick. We haven't lost any animals from it, but we've had a few that were a real struggle. And if you change that diet very dramatically, those cows, their rumens can get in a bind really fast. And of course, I've got my rule breaker, Miss Dollop, who is about a quarter the size of a normal cow. And she can just walk under any normal fence because she's so tiny. She's over here by her crawfish pond. You can see it in there. Thing's nice and flooded. I don't know that we'll get much crawfish out of it this year. Just because it's the first year, we don't have much forage in there. It's the first year being flooded, so it wasn't stocked with crawfish. There were a few wild ones in there. But we're gonna check it out this year. I may go get us a few crawfish traps and run a few in there and see what happens this year. But I think next year we're gonna manage it to the point where we can catch us enough crawfish to hopefully sell a few on the weekends and make a few little extra spending bucks there. Whew, I'm a little out of breath. I was doing a little patchwork on our crawfish pond dam right there. But here's a question I like to pose to you guys. I always love hearing back from y'all. There's plenty of you out there with a lot more grazing experience than myself. Kind of my question for today is, I've kind of run a few different experiments, nothing too significant. Hadn't hit either extreme, I don't think. But when it comes to grazing this ryegrass, clover type stuff, let's try to keep the discussion limited to that. Kind of a annual cool season grass. There's always a bunch of struggles at play here. So I'm trying to look at the health of my herd, you know, with rotational grazing, keeping them on fresh, uncontaminated ground, with getting the maximum out of my forage, which would be this planted ryegrass clover mixture, soil health, all these things considered. And there's a million different factors, like you know. But kind of one of the key questions I always ask myself is, am I better leaving this stuff alone and letting it really grow and graze it after it's basically about to hit maturity to try to maximize all of the above? Or am I better off grazing it throughout the growing season and keeping it, you know, 10 inches high, graze it, let the animals fertilize it, tramp the ground a little bit, let them move on. That's kind of the two trains of thought I always try to balance myself between, but I hadn't really arrived at exactly which one would be the best, because the areas that don't get grazed, like maybe outside the fences by mid-spring, are incredible looking, but you've gotten zero benefit from them up to that point. So I'm always torn, you know, keep them off or rotate them through and let it happen. So let me know what your thoughts are, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Bye.